talk to us a little bit about what is yoga? I mean, again, Americans see it as merely exercise, I think, but I'm aware that it has deep spiritual roots. So tell us a little bit about it.
Very interesting that you mention the Beatles. You know, you can't help but think that you look back to the time when the Beatles had this deep experience that they were seeking after when they came to India. In fact, they sat at the feet of a guru called as Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
Right.
Yeah, and Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was one who has also helped in some sense to popularize yoga. Now, when you really look at yoga, what is yoga? Now, yoga basically is taken from the word yujir and yuja. The very word yoga actually means union with God. Now, if you understand pantheism or Hinduism, basically the classical or the philosophical one basically goes by this, that everything that we see is nothing but ultimate reality, that is Brahman. And who is Brahman? Brahman is again everything that you see. So it comes from that very understanding of all is God and God is all. Now, having said that, now the whole idea in which yoga comes is in the context where they see that the problem with man is that he seems to have forgotten that he is divine. Because man, as understood from this particular worldview, is that man is essentially divine. He is essentially Brahman.
Yes.
But now he seems to have forgotten this very reality that he is divine. And so as a result of that, to get out of that slumber or to get out of that ignorance, all he has to do is now do yoga. Yoga is basically the path of realizing that you are nothing but Brahman, or you are divine. Now, this is entirely different from the Christian worldview. The Christian worldview basically says that the problem with man is sin. Sin is the one problem that has separated man from God. But in pantheistic worldview, the problem with man is not sin. It is his forgetfulness.
Okay.
It is actually his ignorance that he is divine. So I think when you really look at this aspect of its understanding of spirituality, and then yoga being proposed as the path of salvation, so to say, or to attain moksha.
Right.
So you need to understand that when you really look at this philosophy, you cannot separate just simply the exercise, which I think today, or as you have rightly pointed out, the Beatles' interest in yoga. In fact, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi has promoted just the third aspect of that philosophy, that is called as the asana, that is basically the exercise. And in fact, they would probably teach you that, it's just the physical exercise, nothing else. But then to take yoga as just physical exercise and remove or separate it from its philosophical or its metaphysical underpinnings is to do injustice to that very worldview itself.
Now let me ask you this question, because a lot of Christians practice yoga. Now, here is their justification. They say, look, we have different intentions and different beliefs. We like the exercise. We like the benefits that they feel more at peace. They enjoy the stretching, but they don't accept the idea of pantheism or Hindu religious ideas. Do you still think that is not the path to go down, because yoga is so deeply rooted in this Hindu philosophy of pantheism? Or what kind of advice, warning would you propose to maybe even Christians who are attracted to yoga?
It's interesting that you bring this whole dimension of even many Christians now are of the opinion that yoga, there is nothing wrong with just simply adhering to the physical exercises, rather than, that they can even do yoga without probably considering the spiritual underpinnings or the metaphysical issues that it brings along. I think. But what is interesting is that many scholars, even Hindu scholars and many yoga gurus that I have read, if you look at Bharat Thakur, for instance, an example of that, he in his writings have very categorically said that, he finds issues with Christians, especially looking at yoga as merely physical exercise, because he would say that, yoga has two aspects. It is a package. It is both the internal and the external. So you can't just simply take the external and leave the internal. Because at the end of the day, if you look at the whole package of yoga, it is meant to be a combination of both the internal as well as the external. So you can't have the external without the internal. So I think people are mistakenly, they're wrong in probably understanding that it is just merely a physical exercise and ignore the spiritual aspect of it.
Yoga is the very heart of Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
Yoga is in many ways the heart of Hinduism. There is no Hinduism without yoga, and there is no yoga without Hinduism.
You can't take Hinduism out of yoga.
Yoga goes all the way back to the Hindu god Shiva, who is called Yogeshwara, meaning Lord of Yoga. You find yoga being taught in several of the major Hindu scriptures. Krishna, one of the many Hindu gods, was an advocate of yoga. Yoga is also mentioned in the Gita as the main means to attaining salvation. The word means basically to yoke, union. The goal of the Hindu is to be yoked with Brahman.
What is yoga? Yoga is a Sanskrit word that means to yoke with Brahman. What it means is Atman, the individual soul. That's the goal you're trying to reach, a state of consciousness where, as the Sanskrit says, that thou art. You are God. You are Brahman. So you reach a state where you realize that Atman, the individual soul, and Brahman, the universal soul, are one and the same.
The whole idea of waking up your consciousness through arousing the serpent power within you. The idea is that the serpent lays coiled at the base of your spine, and through maneuvers, movements, asanas, you waken the psychic energy to come up through the wheels, the psychic energy, if you will, up to the third eye.
We have this basic belief that the physical poses, the hatha poses, which is the basis of almost all yoga, is hatha poses, the asanas, and we use it in a flow. It's called a vinyasa. In other words, we don't just stay in one pose and go to the next pose. We connect the flow.
The hatha yoga, I always regarded it as simply a physical exercise. I never saw it as a spiritual exercise. But Maharishi used to tell us that if all we did was the yoga, that we would eventually get to cosmic consciousness because of the Kundalini.
A mystical presence is stimulated by the mind through the movements themselves. The exercise can't be neutral or separated from the philosophy, which accepts that a consciousness change will take place. Hatha, or physical poses, asana movements, whatever they be named, are deliberately positioned to oppress or force the flow of Kundalini spirit, a spiritual message to move into the body.
Yoga again has the outward form and the inward form, the physical one and the spiritual one. And none of these pastors are able to distinguish between the physical aspect and the spiritual aspect. They think it's only physical exercise, and they try to introduce this to the common man. Common man always blunders because he can't differentiate.
Many of the Hindu yoga postures are derived after animals and nature. The sun is the original teacher of yoga, and today, as a result, most of the Hindus worship the sun god.
The Hindu sun worship is based on its importance in agriculture, but offering appeasement or worship to the sun, or indeed any created thing, is not a biblical teaching.
I think if you could spend probably 2 minutes on this whole yoga thing, because I think, just go for it.
In a nutshell, yoga, which, apparently some Christians are practicing in church and stuff. Like churches having women's yoga classes and stuff. So the word yoga means union, and union, it's referring to the spiritual goal and agenda of yoga, the word union. What they mean is that there's a universal, impersonal spirit called Brahman, which is this force in the universe and the substance of reality, the substance of the universe. And the goal of yoga is to bring your individual self into union with this universal consciousness, this impersonal field of consciousness, where you recognize that your personal sense of self, your Atman, as they would call it, is ultimately Brahman, is ultimately God. It's ultimately an expression of this oversoul of the universe. And so when you reach this state of consciousness of realizing that, they call that moksha. So the entire goal of yoga is moksha, which is a state of being conscious that you are essentially God.
Well,
it's essentially what it is. So, yeah. So
what would you say to a Christian who says, "Yeah, but I'm just doing the stretching"?
Yeah. Well, the stretches, aside from the fact that regular stretching has been shown to be just effective in treating things like back pain as yoga. The issue with yoga, one issue is that it's idolatry, because the positions that you're doing in yoga, they're meant to honor the sun, the moon, pagan deities, the polytheistic gods of Hinduism. They're named after polytheistic gods of Hinduism. And when you hit these positions, what they're meant to do is invoke the properties of these gods or the power of these gods. Okay? So here you are, you're in a yoga studio. There's incense burning. You got, idols up everywhere. You got some, demonized yoga instructor, who knows what. And then you have, but then you're in a trance-like state of consciousness. Okay, your brain waves are changing. You're an open door. You're more susceptible. Your defense systems have been brought down, and you're opening yourself up to demonic possession, demonic oppression. And people are saying, well, no, you're crazy. Okay, well, let's look to something called the Kundalini effect in yoga, where people who practice yoga, they believe they feel this serpent of energy, as they'll call it, crawling up the base of your spine, through your chakras, your energy systems of your body, up to your third eye, and then illuminating your third eye and enlightening you. But here's the problem: you get side effects like migraine headaches, like depression, like suicidal thoughts, like sickness. And you feel, there's all blogs of people asking, I have the Kundalini effect after doing yoga. I don't feel like I'm even...
Yoga's jacking me up.
Yeah. They'll say, I don't even feel like I'm alone in my own body anymore. I need help. And the reason why is because you're getting demons. And proof of this is in Hinduism, there's something called siddhis. There's primary and secondary siddhis, which are meant to be essentially consequences of practicing yoga. When you practice it properly, an effect of that will be a primary siddhi or secondary siddhi, such as the secondary ones would be being able to revisit the past lives of the gods and see in trance what they did. Being able to leave your body and go into another person's body, okay? Being able to read another person's mind. So yogic traditions tell us that when yoga is done properly, the way it's supposed to be done, you're going to be able to do things that the Bible tells us are only possible with demonic power, okay? Right. And you're going to feel messed up. You're going to feel like you're not alone in your body, and then you're going to need help from people getting deliverance. So it's dangerous.
Yeah. You're just opening up the door to the demonic.
Yeah, you're opening up the door to the demonic, and you can't separate it from its theological, spiritual roots. The whole purpose of yoga is not stretching. It's psycho-spiritual. It's moksha. It's another one is samsara. It's leaving the cycle of death and rebirth, leaving the cycle of reincarnation. And you do that by reaching a certain level of consciousness, a certain state of self-awareness of yourself as the creator, and now you no longer have a need to reincarnate. So those are the two goals of yoga. It's not just to go get fit and, wear Lululemons or whatever, and look relatively cute because you like yoga pants. That's not what it's about. It's it's
Relatively.
it's really dangerous, and it's an open door. And my best friend of 12 years was a yoga instructor, and when I got saved, it threw him for a loop, and he tried to get me to do yoga with him, and I just said, no, I can't do it. I'm convicted. I can't do it. And he got really offended by that, and so him and I haven't been really in contact. I saw him once since I got saved, and the Spirit really filled me before that. And I wasn't trying to say anything convicting, but I feel like when you're filled with the Spirit properly, people can sense God.
Amen.
They sense change, and that witnesses to them enough, you know?
Yeah, and if they're not ready to receive, they can be very hostile.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that's right.
So I shared Christ with him. I shared the gospel, shared the atonement, and planted seeds, and haven't heard from him since. But yeah, yoga's not even close to being acceptable within the body of Christ.
For him, right?
Well, so there you have it. We cannot just separate the mere exercise from the spiritual component of yoga. So if you do practice yoga, just know that when you're in the poses and you're stretching and you're becoming more and more flexible, that you're opening up yourself to unfamiliar spirits and to possibly demonic possession. So as a Christian, yoga is a practice that we should not be doing. If you're not a believer, and if you want to practice yoga after watching this video, please, by all means, go ahead and do it. Freedom. Everybody has the freedom to do whatever they like. I just know that I will not be doing yoga. So, until the next video, thank you, take care, and God bless.